When I started knitting in 2025, I expected to like it, but I did not expect to love it so much that it would become my entire personality. Knitting is actually very easy, and I have full faith in you that you will be able to start in 2026 if you really want to. In this video, I will be showing you the simplest way that I know how you can start knitting in 2026 using only YouTube as a resource. I will be going over the steps that I took to learn the skill in 2025 to get myself comfortable enough to make projects. If you're new here, hi, my name is Maxine, and on this channel I talk about knitting and crocheting, being queer, having ADHD, and sometimes a combination of those things. So if you are a queer person or just a fierce ally who likes to consume queer content, I hope that you will subscribe and stick around because I would be happy to have you. This video is meant to be a guide or template for you to begin your knitting journey. I'm warning you now that I will throw a decent amount of information at you. So if you feel overwhelmed, I give you permission to stop, take a breath, process the information, and come back to this video later. Because honey, the internet is forever and it will still be here when you get back. Please know that you do not have to do all of the things that I mentioned in this video right now, today, tomorrow, or even next week. But since you're here, I can only assume that there's a little voice in your head that's telling you that you should start knitting. So I'm going to tell you exactly how you should do that. Yes! The very first thing that you are going to do is get some yarn and get a pair of needles. Getting materials for a new hobby can be overwhelming because in reality, where the heck do you start? But I'm here to tell you that you literally only need two things to knit. I am passing this advice on to you directly from my therapist, and that is to find a yarn in any texture or color that brings you joy. Once you find some yarn, there will be a recommended size needle to use with that yarn on the package. So for your first pair of needles, just get whatever size it says on the package and don't try to overthink it. I recommend just going to your local big box store and finding the craft section because they will probably have some cheap yarn and cheap needles there that you can just use to get yourself used to whatever the heck you're going to be doing. My recommendations for your initial materials are to get a medium weight yarn, which will be indicated on the label, and I recommend starting with a metal pair of needles because in my opinion, they are the most versatile and will work with the most varieties of yarn. In total, I don't recommend spending any more than $10 on your first pair of needles and your first yarn. Because let's be real, honey, you have no idea how this is going to work out, so you don't need to get crazy. Okay, great. You have the basic materials and you're really excited to get started on this new hobby. Now, what the heck do you do? I'm going to tell you. The first thing you're going to want to do from here is learn how to cast on. This is a term you'll hear for making initial stitches on the needles, which gets the yarn onto the needles so that you can actually start knitting. There are two types of cast-ons that you will likely use for your initial project. The first, I don't even know if it actually has a name, but it's just a cast-on where you use your thumb or your index finger to wrap the yarn around your finger and put it on the needles. I tried looking it up on YouTube and all I find is it's literally called the thumb cast-on. The alternative is called the long tail cast-on, which you will probably hear come up a lot, but it is a little bit more technical and maybe I don't recommend it for someone who is an absolute beginner. I personally recommend starting with the finger or thumb cast on. When you are learning, I recommend casting on between 12 and 20 stitches onto your needle to make it easier for you to go back and forth and get used to turning your work. Once you know how to cast on, you are one step closer to actually literally knitting. Okay, amazing. Now you're ready to start knitting, but how do you do that? And as much as I want to give you a simple answer to that question, the reality is that how you're going to do that is going to depend on the style of knitting that you choose to move forward with. There are many different styles of knitting, but the big three that I have encountered in my first year of knitting are English style knitting, continental style knitting, and Portuguese style knitting. Generally, when people here in America think of knitting, they think of the English style knitting, which for me is the one that I started with and the one that I would also recommend that you start with. However, many people who come to the knit world from the crochet world claim to have success by starting with the continental style of knitting that involves tensioning your yarn in one hand. There are other styles of knitting aside from this, but I think it is worth investigating initially these big three styles so that you can just see which one tickles your brain the best and you can focus on learning that one from the beginning. Be open to choosing one style to start, but maybe not enjoying it and trying a different style and maybe finding success at that. None of the decisions that you make here are absolute, and understand that you might not like what you're doing and may need to find ways to pivot. I personally knit English style. I started knitting English style and then I switched to continental style because there's a lot of propaganda on the internet that says that continental is faster or helps you speed knit or whatever. But the reality of it is the fastest way that you're going to knit is the way that feels best in your body. After all, knitting is a fine motor skill and all of our bodies are built different and process fine motor skills in different ways. Knitting is meant to be relaxing and enjoyable, so don't even think about how fast you're going at the beginning. Just try to get those loops right. I promise you it's all going to be okay. Remember also whether you claim to be right-handed or left-handed to include that in your search results when you're learning how to knit, along with the style of knit that you choose to do. In whatever style you decide, take as much time as you need to learn the anatomy of the knit stitch. So the knit stitch is really what knitting is. But there are two main different stitches involved in knitting, which are the knit stitch and the purl stitch. The knit stitch is likely what comes to mind when you think of knitting, and the purl stitch is essentially the inverse of a knit stitch, which is used to create different textures of stitches. When you are first learning, I recommend only focusing on the knit stitch in your selected style so that you don't get overwhelmed and try to do too much at once. Because what happens when we get overwhelmed? We give up. Try and look closely as you can at how to knit tutorials, watch them in slow motion, and try to understand exactly what is happening as you're moving your yarn around your needles to make loops and stitch things together. Try to find a creator who explains things in a fashion that you like and has energy that you like so that you can try and have some fun while you're doing this, because it is going to be hard at first. Going back and forth on your needles doing the knit stitch, you will end up with something called the garter stitch, which is accomplished on flat needles by knitting across all rows. Once you feel comfortable with this and understand how the stitches are happening, then you should move on to learning how to do the purl stitch. The purl stitch is used on flat needles to achieve the classic knit look, which is formally called the stockinette stitch. Anatomically, the purl stitch is the inverse of the knit stitch and is used in certain situations to make certain types of stitches, depending on whether you're knitting in the round or knitting flat. If you only ever want to knit flat and only want to knit a garter stitch, you can just skip this and move on. But you're already here, so you may as well give it a shot, right? Yes! How you do the purl stitch is also going to vary depending on your selected style of knitting. So just like when you were learning the knit stitch, take time to learn what style of purling is going to work best for you. Because if you really want, you can start mixing styles together once you get a little bit more comfortable. Learning how to knit and purl will likely be absolutely infuriating over the next couple weeks while you're trying to learn how to do this. But I promise you, your brain will catch up to what your body is trying to do, and you will learn how to do this as long as you keep practicing. We didn't learn how to write in a day when we were kids, and we sure as heck aren't going to learn how to knit in a day as adults. But when you do feel comfortable with the purl stitch, or if you skip this part and just want to do the knit stitch for now, you can move on to the next step, which is learning how to cast off. Okay, so now you learned how to knit and purl, and you have this swatch on your needles, and it probably looks kind of meh, but you are over it and want to start again and try something else. This is where the term casting off comes in. Casting off is a procedure for getting your work off of your needles and into the world. You'll hear casting off also called binding off in the knit community, but just note that those mean the same thing. Just like casting on, casting off is also done in many ways, but I recommend you just focus on a traditional cast off, which again, I don't think there's actually a name for it, but when you're looking at beginner tutorials for casting off, I found that this was almost exclusively the type of cast off that was taught. Basically involves just knitting your last row and then slipping the previous stitch over the stitch that you just made and repeating until you have no stitches left on your needle. If you do come from the crochet world, I recommend keeping a crochet hook handy for this because it will actually help you. However, do not stress if you don't know how to crochet because you can easily cast off just using your knitting needles. Once you get your swatch off the needles, congrats, you have actually knit something from start to finish. Good job! Once you take that first swatch off your needle, it's probably going to look like crap. Let's just be real. But please do not let this defeat you. We all started somewhere, and I promise you that somewhere was not pretty. Knitting is absolutely never going to be perfect, and that is the beauty that's involved in this craft, is whenever you make something, it's going to be unique. What? Come here. You want to be in a YouTube video? Like any other skill you might pick up, there are tons of other things involved in knitting that I have not mentioned in this video. However, as I attempt to give you the most simplest guide that I can think of to how to actually start to knit, this is really all you need to finesse the baseline motor skill that is knitting. Like any other fine motor skills, they need to be done over and over again until your body and brain sync up and can comfortably perform the task. I have been knitting for just under a year now, and I cannot stress to you enough how important it is that you be patient during this process. Be prepared to do the same thing many times over and over again. Be prepared to throw down your needles and get really angry and think that you'll never be able to do this. Be prepared to make a swatch or a project and think it looks really ugly. The best thing that I can suggest for you to get through this introductory period is to create an environment that makes these growing pains a little bit easier to cope with. Put on some good music, find a show that makes you laugh, find a friend who might be interested in learning how to knit as well. Give yourself something to look forward to while you ride in the front seat of the struggle bus to your final destination. Because I promise you, the more that you practice, the more likely it is that you'll wake up one day and it'll just make sense. Whatever your goals are with learning how to knit, I promise you, they are within reach. You have got this. This video is meant to be the simplest guide that I can think of for how you can learn how to knit in 2026. Maybe this process will look a little bit different for you, and if it does, that is perfectly okay. There are tons of educational resources for you out there on YouTube, and the more you dig deep, the more likely it is you'll be able to learn. Regardless, I wish you the best of luck on your journey and know that you will soon be making whatever you want with ease. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, as well as subscribe to my channel to stick around for more crafty and queer content. Anyway, bye!